Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fidelis. This is Cassie, and today we have a special guest. We have Emily Zanotti, who is the senior editor at the Daily Wire. You are in Chicago. How's the weather up there right now?
It's really cold, actually. It's just really cold.
Yeah, I'm here in Florida. It's only about, in the 30s, but I bet it's a lot worse there, huh?
I think my phone this morning said it was -1. So
Wow.
I'm good staying inside for most of the day today, I think.
Well, today we are going to tackle a new topic we haven't talked about yet today, and that's why we have Emily as our guest. We are going to talk about infertility, and that is something that I know a lot of women struggle with. And Emily, that's something that you yourself have had to deal with. So can you tell us a little bit about your story with that?
Yeah, so about a year into our marriage, we started trying to have kids, and we quickly discovered that wasn't happening as quickly as we wanted to. We ended up going to a bunch of doctors, probably 2 or 3, getting pushed around from fertility doctors and OBGYNs. Finally, just about probably in 2013, we found a Catholic doctor that started working with us. But when you don't do IVF, it takes a lot longer. So it was a long time of surgeries and medications, and it's been a long road. I think right now we've been struggling with it for about 4.5 years.
And how has that been for, I'm sure it's difficult, but how has that been for you and your husband?
It's been very hard. It's been one of these things that I think we never anticipated in our marriage. And, when you're in pre-Cana and they're talking about NFP and all this kind of stuff, you think it's going to be so easy. And I know from experience with other friends that NFP is certainly not easy at all. It's a difficult road to navigate. And you have to navigate it with a lot of faith and a lot of work and a lot of emotion. It's one of the most basic things that a woman's body is supposed to do. And when it doesn't happen, there's this incredible feeling of failure that you haven't fulfilled this calling to be a mother. You haven't fulfilled the thing that you are supposed to do. You're a married couple. You want to have kids. It's a very difficult thing.
How do you keep yourself from losing that faith and losing hope?
I yell a lot at God. I think he can take it, right? I used to confess this all the time, that I would just get so angry and I would yell at God, and the priest was like, well, he doesn't expect you to be any different from who you are day to day. So if you pray and you use your regular voice, you don't have to imagine yourself as a great saint or an angel singing praises. You can just use your regular voice. And if that's anger, that's anger. But it's been a long road. You lose faith a lot, especially if you're, 4 years into this and you're following the church's teachings and you're praying and nothing's happening. And even weirder still, I always say we discern each path of treatment as it goes. So when we get a sense of what didn't work for us, what could work for us, we pray about the path. We try to discern what God wants for us. And I make the joke that each time we do that, everything doubles. So I did that once and I got needles. I did that a second time, I got surgery. I did that a third time, I doubled the number of needles. It feels like an ongoing test for a lot of people, I think.
Now you mentioned, because of the fact that you're a Catholic, you can't go through IVF and everything. So what kind of options are available for you when you are struggling with infertility?
So there's actually a surprising number of options. I won't say that we didn't at first at least consider IVF. That it wasn't something we wanted to do, but at the time, 4 or 5 years ago, before we'd found a Catholic doctor, we went to fertility doctors. We went to a fertility clinic, and we walked in, and the experience was just so humiliating to me. And I'm sure this isn't the way for everybody, but it felt so much like I was just going into a factory, and they wanted me mostly to hand over my money more than anything. It was impersonal, and the office was very sparse, and it just didn't feel right. And I cried all the way home because I was like, there just isn't another option for me. If I don't like this, if I don't look at this financial sheet that they gave me and agree to pay the $17,000, it was incredible. I didn't feel like there was an option for me. So for women going through this in the Catholic Church, there's a couple of different options. You certainly can discern adoption. You can discern foster. You can discern all sorts of other options aside from fertility treatments. But there's also NAPRO technology, which is a form of NFP, and it uses the Creighton model and some other models to look at your charts and see if you have things like a luteal phase deficiency. What I do is a little bit different. So I actually have an incredible Catholic fertility doctor who used to be one of the top fertility doctors in Illinois, and then he had a religious conversion. Mm-hmm. So I get this amazing benefit of all of that. And I do pretty much anything you would do as someone who struggles with endometriosis and struggles with the first few months of what would be IVF. And I give myself probably about 14 shots a month. I have constant blood work that we do all these stimulations. And then we wait and we hope. The bad part about this is it takes much longer and it may never happen. The good part about this is we've discovered things that were wrong with me that we would not have discovered through traditional fertility methods. I had endometriosis, I had cysts, I had anovulation. It was just a big old mess down there. and so it really does treat you as a healthcare patient, not just a fertility patient, which has been nice.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned NAPRO technology because that's something that gets brought up a lot in Catholic circles. Whether you're dealing with infertility or not, it feels like, no matter what the issue has to deal with fertility, everyone says, go to NAPRO. Has it been the miracle for you that everyone makes it out to be?
Well, it depends on what you mean by NAPRO technology. So it's also a brand name. People have to remember. I think it can be a miracle for a lot of people if just the plain NAPRO, which is just, you can go to an NFP instructor and get NAPRO technology, which is basically that they look at your chart and they tell you what's wrong. For a lot of people who are just not super clear on how a cycle works and things like that, NAPRO is amazing. But then you have the 30% or so of us who have this unexplained infertility that the traditional, what we would consider, I hate doing finger things, but I will, NAPRO technology, it might not necessarily work. You have to go to a more intrusive sort of situation. So I don't want to say that it hasn't been a miracle because I don't think that without having this option, we would have any hope at all. However, NAPRO is a lot harder than people make it out to be. I see a lot of these posts on Catholic blogs about how amazing NAPRO is and you should just do it because it has no needles, nothing. And my NAPRO technology involves needles, it involves surgery, it involves a lot of hard work and a lot of hard choices. Infertility is not by any stretch easy on your spiritual life, your emotional life, your physical life. And it really bothers me, I think, a little bit when I see Catholic bloggers especially Catholic bloggers who have lots of kids and mommy blogs and things like that say something like, "Oh, this is super easy," because there's no road here that's super easy. Being a Catholic was never meant to be easy. Whether you have, method failures in NFP, you have struggles with natural family planning, or you have infertility, this is it's hard. It's hard, and I wish more people would acknowledge that it's hard.
It seems like that's kind of an overarching issue in general, whether you're talking about infertility or not. Like when you go through pre-Cana and you have your little NFP class and they present it to you like it's the easiest thing in the world, or if you're having any kind of fertility issues, well, just go get NaPro and it'll be fixed because it's magic. Like no one really prepares you for the difficulties of these things.
They don't, and it's honest. It's honest to say that they don't, and that's not to say that there's I'm sure there's amazing NFP instructors out there and great people, but it doesn't do anybody a favor to say how easy it is. When I had NFP as part of my pre-Cana, they actually wheeled in a TV with a VCR. This is 2010. They wheeled in a TV with
the same thing. Mine too. Maybe it's like a prerequisite, like you have to use this VHS from 1987.
And the people in it looked like they were from an episode of Seinfeld. Like they had this huge hair. It was unbelievable. And it made it sound so amazing. Like it was going to make my marriage so much better because I used NFP and I had these little stickers that were babies. I was so confused by it. I ended up taking a class and then all of a sudden it didn't work. And I think a lot of people, maybe more than you think, have issues with either fertility or with NFP. And it's hard. We have to admit to ourselves that it's hard and that there is a certain element of faith and work that you have to put into it, and that it has the opportunity to drive your marriage apart, but it also has the opportunity to bring you closer together too.
Do you feel like we should do more to discuss the topic of infertility in pre-Cana and in Catholic marriage counseling? Is that something that should be talked about?
I think it's a possibility that, people should say something about it. A lot of people just misunderstand it, or they think that the way you respond to a couple with infertility is to say, well, you can always adopt, or you should really just get foster kids. Or, just a NaPro will work for you. It's a miracle. I don't know if it's necessarily something you have to go over in pre-Cana, but I do think that having more public knowledge of it and how frequent it is in people's lives. 1 in 8 people will have trouble conceiving. And that's a lot of people. If you go to church on Sunday.
A small minority, Yeah,
if you go to church on Sunday and you have 800 people in your church, 100 of those people are going to have trouble. And so the church isn't always prepared to speak to those people where they are. And you do find people, well, you can always adopt. Well, that's a whole different discernment process. Adoption is a whole different discernment process. Foster children.
Not easy in of itself either.
Yeah, it doesn't heal infertility. It gives you a child, and that's great. But that comes with a whole different group of considerations. How do I feel about adoption? Do I want to adopt? Am I just adopting because I think I'll save somebody? Can I deal with a home study? Because when you're infertile, baby showers and things like that have the opportunity to hurt. And a lot of times home studies for adoption will make you have a room prepared in your house for a baby for a long time. So that you can take a baby right on the fly. And I don't know if I necessarily want to live in a house where there's an empty cradle. So I think if people were more understanding about exactly how many people struggle with this and how to talk to those people with a little bit of sympathy and just a little bit of I don't need to tell you what to do kind of thing.
What are comments that are more helpful or compassionate, or things that people who aren't struggling with infertility, what are things that we can and should say?
Here's my baby to snuggle. That's a good one. I do like, I always say the best thing that you can always say is this sucks, and a hug. And it's always going to. It's always going to suck. And one thing that I found is being Catholic, sometimes it's nice to know that people are out there who believe the way that you do. IVF is a very prominent thing in our culture. People think it's an easy solution. You look at people like Chrissy Teigen and Kim Kardashian and, oh, I'm just going to have IVF and have a surrogate and everything's going to be fine. So you often find that people in your life who aren't Catholic will be like, well, why don't you just do IVF? It's the easy way out. Well, it's not the easy way out, first off. But they do think I'm a religious lunatic sometimes. When I'm ordering boxes of injectables and trying every month and failing, they start to think, well, she's just a religious lunatic. But it's just to have Catholics who openly oppose IVF say to you that they understand what you're going through. I think that's just a huge thing, because that kind of support is what's needed sort of in the material world.
I know that, a lot of people with infertility, it's not necessarily they can't have a baby. Like I have some friends that they have secondary infertility. They have a baby and then they can't get pregnant again. And I know that there is talk from them. There's a lot of judgment, when they go to church, people see that they only have one child and they think, oh, well, they must be using contraception. They're not. There's a lot of judgment towards couples that don't have big families, it seems. Is that something that you've experienced?
So I became very vocal about my infertility really early on, largely because I was self-conscious about that. We go to a traditional Latin Mass church, and so to be a married couple for 7 years and not have 4 kids by now, it's weird. It's very weird. We were the odd ones out. And I had this weird sense of self-consciousness about it, which I shouldn't have because it's not something I can control. But I was very vocal about it early on because I didn't want people thinking that I had this contraceptive mentality, especially the fact that I have a high-powered job and I work in a very prominent sort of celebrity type status. Not me, my boss. I work for him. So it's hard. But I think there's judgment going both ways, right? I think people get judged for large families just as much as they get judged for small families. It's not easy doing this from any side, right? I mean,
no, it's not.
Yeah. Right. I mean, everyone looks at you if you have a bunch of kids and they're like, do you know what does that? Right. And then I go to church and you shouldn't be using contraception. Well, I'm not. This fertility thing is a much bigger part of Catholic marriages than I think we've often admitted to ourselves.
Right. And so if the church were to talk more about that, that could possibly maybe help with the issue, maybe in homilies one week, especially with some of the readings we've had just recently.
Well,
seems like it would be a perfect little, way to talk about it.
Well, especially one of the things I love about this time of year, right, is that you get the Annunciation reading. And everyone thinks, oh, that's going to bother you, right? You're supposed to be a mother. But the best part of that reading, actually, is the angel Gabriel, right? At the end, he says, your cousin Elizabeth, who was barren, is 7 months along. Anything is possible with God. And he's speaking directly about infertility there. He's not like, well, we already got this Annunciation thing happening. You're already pregnant by the Holy Spirit. We got this. This is cool. You get that. But this woman who probably was 35 years old, right? I mean, she's not going to be like 70 years old. You know, she's ancient and barren. But she's conceived and she's pregnant, and anything is possible with God, because anything is possible with God. Over and over and over in the scriptures, there's references to women who are barren and in their olden ages conceive, and they conceive for a reason. Their babies are monumental in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. So there's a lot of ways that the church can encourage people, to give them hope, to say the church looks out for you. It doesn't necessarily just want you to have a family, that you have a vocation and you have the ability to be a mother in other ways. Anything is possible with God, yes, and that should keep you hopeful even when you're discerning these things and they seem very difficult. But there's also an entire church that requires the genius of women. And women make the church happen. We're the healthcare workers, we're the educators, we are the teachers, we're the journalists, and that is all very necessary to the life of the church. So I think the church could do a lot better job of reaching out to people and explaining that this is a possibility and that we love you anyway and that you have a vocation, but that there is always hope. That message of hope, I think, is one that people just really need to hear. When you're in the depths of infertility, when you can't have a child and everything seems like it's not working, having the church come and say, first off, it's fine to be upset about this, but I want you to know that there are great women in this lexicon who have not had children and they've made a huge difference, and they've had children in their barren ages and have made a difference. Just women in general. Yeah, I think the church could just do a better job of encouraging women to be whatever God tells them they should be. It sounds rambling. But.
No, it really doesn't. Is there, I mean, you said that there's more that, the church could be doing, and I'm sure that's true. Are there resources already that exist for couples that are struggling with infertility that you know of within the church?
Yes and no. Various individual churches do have some support groups. But overall, I think there's not a lot there. If you have miscarriages, and that's certainly part and parcel of infertility, I think there's lots of people who can conceive and then they can't carry a child. There is ministries there. And there is infertility ministries in general, but it's an area that the church really hasn't explored. And part of that is because society itself hasn't really explored it too. Infertility has an awareness month now and all of that, but it's not something we talk about in polite conversation. You don't just sit down to coffee and talk with your friends and be like, you know what, I'm barren. Let's talk about that. You don't, it's not something you talk about. So I think as society moves to acknowledge it a little bit more, the church will too.
Why do you think there's such a stigma around it that makes people not want to talk about infertility?
I don't know. I wish that I had some. I think it's just an uncomfortable topic, maybe. It goes when you're in NFP and you know all about that. It's really super easy to talk about fertility and times of the month and fertile mucus and all that good stuff. But it's almost like talking about death or disfigurement or disease. It's not something you know what to say about. And it's the same as if one of your friends had cancer. What would you tell that person? Do you want to sit down and have lunch and talk about your disease? Well, maybe I do, but maybe I don't. So I think there's a reticence to want to talk about it just because it's such a hard topic to talk about. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that. I think women tend to suffer in silence too because they feel like no one understands them. Especially Catholic women struggling with infertility. How many of us are there out there? Not that many as far as I know. But that's because I just don't know. I'm sure that women are in their homes and families struggling with this every day and they just don't say anything. So it's all about creating maybe a more open culture to discuss things like this because we just don't as a society.
Yeah, and I think that what you said about women too, that's part of, I mean, it's like, think about when a man has a cold versus when a woman has a cold.
Yes.
You know, like women, exactly like you said, are very much like this, suck it up and suffer and, just kind of deal with it. And, you don't really complain.
Yeah.
You don't complain. And so I kind of wonder, it's got to play a role, like feeling like you don't want to burden anyone with your burden.
Right. And also it feels like a failure. Like I said earlier, the biggest thing that I struggled with is if I want a degree, I can go to college and get a degree. If I want to learn how to cook, I can get online and watch YouTube videos and cook. I have all these faculties, but my body is made for doing certain things. And it's supposed to just do those things. I was built for that. I don't have to go out and learn how to do those things. Mm-hmm. And when your body fails you like that, I think it's one of those worst moments of this whole thing is to think it just doesn't want to work. So when I got surgery, it turns out my ovaries had fused through endometriosis. And then when we unfused them, they decided that they were like, I'm done. I've been through enough. And so a friend of mine actually sent me a stuffed ovary. I don't have it, so that I would have a functioning ovary. Like, they were like, this ovary is nice to you. It likes you. This idea that these things that are just supposed to work from the moment you're born and they just don't. I think it's a shame you shouldn't have, but it's a shame that's there anyway. I don't know how to improve that. I think maybe just more people knowing that it happens and that it's okay that it happens and that there's things you can do as a Catholic and there's ways to get through it. That would help. But it's still, as women, we like to suffer in silence and then potentially hold it against somebody later on.
Have you been able to work past that feeling of failure?
Yes.
To do that?
Oh my gosh. In 4 years, I worked through a lot of different waves of this. Part of it is accepting. You have to go through the process of, depression and bargaining and acceptance eventually. You have to go through that wave of mourning. There are lots of really good resources out there, many by non-Catholic women going through infertility and starting to accept that this is just the way things are. And that's one of the hardest parts of this, is accepting that this is just the way things are and the way things are always going to be. But for now, for us, and I include my husband, but he's not here, we take it one step at a time. We go one day at a time. We go 1 month at a time. We don't think too far into the future, and we don't talk too much about failures, because I think that's the key to just keeping going. And for us, it's discerning too. someday there will come an end to this. We will stop trying. That will be a whole new set of emotions and failures and concerns. But for right now, we discern each individual day as each day. We discern each individual treatment together. And we do it together. Part of the problem is, I think, with infertility, too, if you're an infertile couple, the woman takes almost all of the abuse. We're the ones that have to get the blood work. We're the ones that get the ultrasounds, and not the fun, like, on your stomach kind. These are, like, the undignified, can't wear your pants in the office kind. And you have to give yourself the shots. And you have to go to the doctor 4 or 5 times a month. And you're the one that finds out first that it didn't work. So there's a lot that will drive you apart as a couple, too, because you don't feel like your husband is experiencing these things. So having him by my side, we've learned to do this together, because by ourselves, we would be mourning on our own and feeling failure on our own. And so that's helped a lot as well.
So has it been difficult for your marriage, or has it brought you closer together, or maybe kind of a weird combination of both?
I think that's exactly. It's like a weird combination of both, right? For a long time, it drove us further apart. We had a miscarriage back in 2014, and that was very destructive. That is just the hardest thing. And it set us back so far. And it forced us to reevaluate what we were doing and how we wanted to proceed, and if we could handle that sort of emotional burden a second time. And then sooner or later, we worked through it. You have to communicate. We learned what we were doing wrong in our marriage really fast. Communication became essential, and knowing what each other was feeling became essential. And especially with infertility, spontaneity and things like that, being romantic, very important, because otherwise you're scheduling everything. And NFP is very much that way too. You're scheduling everything. Even if you want to get pregnant on NFP, you got to schedule everything. So you have to stay emotionally connected in some way. Otherwise it gets real boring real fast. So it's been a weird combination of both. At one point in time, I'd like to go back to that girl in her wedding dress and say, it's going to be more sickness than health. It's going to be more bad than good. And you're going to experience things that they're not preparing you for. But at the same time, I don't know if I would trade it. I don't know if I would trade this experience. If we do have a kid, I fear that kid's going to be the most spoiled, like, child in a bubble, because like, you can never get hurt.
Well, I mean, they'd probably still survive, and, you know, it's okay. Kids can be a little spoiled. It would be all right. They're amazingly resilient, you know. So spoiling never hurt anyone.
Right. Exactly. No spoiling ever hurt anyone. He'll be fine.
Yeah.
He'll be good.
Is it more difficult, do you think, because of the culture today where, you know, I mean, you have on the one hand in the Catholic Church, you know, infertility is kind of kept quiet and no one really acknowledges it. And worse, there are people that sit there and, you know, oh, well, that couple, they don't have any kids, or they only have one kid. They must be contracepting. But then on the other hand, you have in the secular culture, you know, oh, well, just go use IVF, or, oh, just go get a surrogate, you know.
Right.
So that must make it more difficult, kind of, like,
that conflict, I think.
Place, you know, in between for you.
Yeah, that conflict is weird. It's very weird, to speak very frankly about it. I also got kind of angry a couple weeks ago because you have Khloe Kardashian, who is, millions of people follow the Kardashians. I can't stand them, but I have to acknowledge that they're a cultural, you know, touchstone for us. And she pretended to go through infertility.
Yeah.
For the show. And she did not. She decided she didn't want to do IVF, and there was this whole thing, and And while she was doing it, I was actually very grateful because there was somebody on TV who was going through infertility and choosing not to do IVF. And then she turns out she just lied about it. Like, she's like, oh, I was just trying to cover for my alcoholic husband, and we weren't having kids because I wasn't going to bring a kid into this situation. Okay. You just took a very important thing to a lot of people and you made it seem almost completely unimportant. And then on the other hand, you have people like Chrissy Teigen who are huge IVF proponents to the degree that they choose the gender of their babies. She won't wear Dolce & Gabbana clothes because Dolce & Gabbana spoke out against IVF. Aw, look at that, so cute. So cute. She won't wear Dolce & Gabbana clothes because Dolce & Gabbana spoke out against IVF. And oh my gosh, there are these horrible people who don't realize that they're destroying women's lives. It's like IVF isn't all that great. If you dig in, it's humiliating and it's expensive. And there was actually Lena Dunham, of all people. She has a Lenny letter that goes out every month to mostly feminists.
Yeah.
But there was an article in there about a woman who had IVF and had exposed a lot of the problems with it. And she said she didn't feel connected to her husband anymore. And it was just this undignified procedure that left them very cold. And not to say that everyone's experience with IVF is like that, but we don't acknowledge the bad parts of anything. We think it's just such a great thing that everyone can do and it will be magically solving all of your problems, and it's not. So when we approach infertility in the regular world, it's like, oh, this will solve all of your problems. Nothing's wrong with you. You're owed a child.
Yeah.
That's another thing, is there's a secular idea that you're owed children, that the universe should give it to you if you want it. The universe should give you anything you want when you want it.
That has to be like a good child too, because heaven forbid, you go through IVF and then you get a kid with a cleft lip or something.
Right. Oh my gosh. Like, what are you going to do? It would be terrible if they had ADHD or God forbid they have an issue or it's amazing. Yeah. It's I am owed this child, and this child is just a high-end accessory that I get to carry around and dress up. It's not really a person. There's a lot that's really wrong with the secular world when it comes to children. And not to say that the Catholic Church is perfect on the issue, or that we as women treat each other very well, even within the Catholic Church on that issue. But, oh man, there's some weird stuff that goes on in the secular world.
I remember seeing something, and I mean, I'm not infertile. I have 5 children in 6 years. But
they're all adorable, and I love them, and they're super
They are.
cute.
I have an issue that it's like my husband. I have like hyperfertility or something. I don't know. And that's a whole other issue.
That's a whole other issue. Yeah, that's a whole other issue, right?
I mean, 5 C-sections, so it's like it's getting to the point where I can't keep getting pregnant. But that's another issue. But one of my kids has Down syndrome, and so that's something that is, personal for me. And I remember seeing a few years ago in Britain that parents who had been going through IVF, the majority of them that had children with Down syndrome, they got the diagnosis, they would go and have an abortion. I remember thinking oh my gosh, you're going through IVF, so obviously you're struggling with infertility and you want a child.
Right.
And then because the child has a defect, is flawed, do you want to be a parent, or do you just want an accessory?
Right, exactly. Do you want an actual child? Do you want to care for another human being, or do you just want a purse to carry around? Because you can spend $30,000 on an Hermes Birkin bag and apparently get as much happiness out of it. Because I'm flabbergasted by that. The commodification of human life is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
people that go through IVF and they have multiples, and then they, selectively reduce them.
Right. Yeah. It's never called we aborted them.
Embryos into yourself. What did you think was going to happen? Like, didn't you know that was a possibility?
It's on the bottle of Clomid when, they hand it to you. It says you could have 6 kids and get it all done at once. Not that would be a problem. If my ovaries just exploded, and I'm a little person, but if we could get it all done in one shot, that would be amazing. But it's all very disturbing, the degree to which IVF, and this is something that is not a popular opinion in the secular world, but it's disturbing the degree to which IVF has made human life a commodity and has made it a designer item or something you buy and something you trade and something that's worthless, essentially. You create life and you destroy it in petri dishes. That used to be the subject of horrifying sci-fi movies. But now we're working on, we should improve our IVF techniques so we don't get children with quote-unquote defects. No child is born with a defect. A child is born a child. And you take a human being with whatever they come to you with. We're not defective human beings because we have some problem, but we seem to see it this way because we've decided we want perfect humans and we want to control every aspect of this, and we want to make sure that IVF is available to everybody and that human beings can be created and destroyed by ourselves. And it's just it's something that people often complain the Catholic Church has a backwards stand on, but I don't see it as backwards at all. And I'm in the middle of it.
It's all very like Gattaca. That's what I always think. It's like, right? Like they sit there and you hear, people that are going through IVF and they screen the embryos for certain characteristics. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, this was like a cautionary tale, like what, 15 years ago?
Like 50 years ago, they were telling you not to do this. And all of a sudden we're like, let's just make sure my kid has one brown eye and one green eye and purple hair. I don't know. But you can do that. Genetic sequencing will allow you to do that. And we're not that far away from it. It's kind of scary. I don't want a perfect child. I'm not a perfect human. There are variables that you can't control. And people are going to find that out the hard way.
A healthy child to begin with, you're not guaranteed they're going to stay that way.
No. I mean, you're not guaranteed that a kid's going to come out an A+ student and get into Harvard and be great at get a pro sports contract or be a famous artist. None of those things are guaranteed in life. So it's going to strike people, I think, a little bit that there are things you really can't control. I mean, you can have a really nice looking baby, I guess, but and one that you can predict you're going to need pink clothes for before it pops out, but it's not going to work out down the road.
Now, one thing that you have talked about, in some of the groups that we're in and everything, is kind of the tendency of people who are not going through infertility to maybe not be so compassionate or thoughtful in how they deal with, people going through this. What kind of things, do people do that are hurtful? Stop doing.
I have a lot of funny stories. Everyone's got an old wives' tale about what will help you conceive. Whether it's eating pineapple. I once had someone tell me that I should rub oregano essential oil on my feet. We tried that and I just smelled like a pizza, which, I mean, I guess to some people's husbands that might be really super attractive, but it wasn't. It just smelled like pizza. It did nothing. We've had people send us things. We've had people contact us, telling us all about their amazing idea for a treatment. If you have advice, keep it to yourself, I think, is one of the biggest things. Don't try to solve someone else's problem. If someone came to you and said they have cancer, would you really tell them to eat pineapple chunks? No, you wouldn't. And this is no different. And I always tell people that we're beyond that. A lot of times people will be like, oh, I walked around in 6 circles and used a crystal over my belly and it made the sperm hit the egg. I'm sure it did, but for a very long time, my ovaries were stuck to each other. So there was no essential oil in the world that was going to pop them apart. No chiropractor was going to be able to massage those into place. I do like acupuncture, but largely because it forces, I'm a hyper individual and it forces me to relax because there's a possibility that I will be stabbed if I don't. So, but I think the best thing that you can say to someone who has infertility is, I get that what you're going through is hard and it sucks. And if there's ever a day where you just want to sit in yoga pants and eat a tuna noodle casserole right out of the fridge, that's fine. It's tough. It's like this. And like any disease or any failing, you're always going to have times of great hope and times of great sadness. And to know that there are people out there who can reach out to you and just give you a hug and say it sucks, I think that's the best thing that you can do for someone struggling with infertility. And like I said, I will try to steal your baby. That's just a thing I do. Don't leave me alone in the room with an under 9-month-old. I might take it. Just ask. I have several friends who I babysit for, and I'm like, I'm just keeping your child. It's fine. But yeah, just say that you understand and try not to judge their path too. That's another thing that we've had trouble with secular people and even Catholic people. There is no obligation in the Catholic Church to endure this. That's something that people might not know, is if you cannot get pregnant and you are open to life as a married couple, you do not have the obligation to go through NAPRO. You do not have the obligation to give yourself shots in the stomach. You don't have that. That's something that people discern. Mm-hmm. And be kind and understand their vocation and their discernment and their prayer life and their faith. Because it is hard when other people judge you more than anything. There's already enough judging going on here, judging myself, that it gets harder when you have outsiders who are saying things that are judgmental. So just scroll past, as we say in the world of social media.
Well, and people, even as someone like that doesn't have infertility, I still notice people that do things that are just hurtful and insensitive, like the April Fool's Day prank that, everyone likes to do. And pretend, which is like, why do you do that? Like, why? I just don't get it. Or, when they sit there and talk about how a picture of, the ultrasound with the needles and stuff around and say it's creepy. I mean, just like, why?
Yeah, that was actually something I think we shared. We were in a similar group where someone posted a picture of it turned out to be an IVF picture.
No, but they doubled down. This person was like, even if it wasn't, it's still creepy, and I would never do that.
Yeah, and I'm like, you don't know what you would do. When I was married 3 months, I didn't know that that's what I would do. But I have 2 whole boxes of needles now in my kitchen. There's going to be a picture of a baby in a heart of needles. It's going to happen because I did that.
But I mean, even without those 2 specific examples, I mean, those are just examples, but it's like, I mean...
What are you thinking? Yeah. There's just some things you just shouldn't do. I give some people the benefit of the doubt. A lot of people like to announce their pregnancies on holidays. That has always been something very difficult for me personally. But man, those April Fool's jokes where they're like, I'm pregnant. For real. There was a meme going around a little while ago that had a picture of twins. And it was like,
yeah,
and they're like, I don't know who these parents are, but they're in for, really? Come on. I hate those April Fool's things. Or let me do this random thing where I joke about being pregnant or I joke about not being pregnant. It's just don't do that. Would you joke about, you have to see infertility as an actual problem You wouldn't joke about, oh, I have cancer. Oh, no, I don't. No, you're not going to do that. So just have some common sense.
Yeah. And, try to be, I guess, because again, like this isn't something I've actually experienced. So, but I try to be empathetic just in general as a person. And I feel like that can go a long way for everyone, like every now and then I'll see people, they'll sit there and say, oh, well, that's so bad that you're going through infertility. I'm so sorry. But if you don't like me announcing at Christmas, well, you should just get over it. And
it's hard. It's hard.
Legitimate reasons to announce, at Christmas or whatever, but there's still ways to do it compassionately and to have some empathy for someone who's going through something like this.
If you know somebody in your family is going through something like this, call them first. Don't call them first. Tell them what you're going to do. You may want to do it. They may say it's fine. I don't speak for everybody. I don't speak for everyone with infertility. I don't speak for everyone with red hair. I don't speak for everyone for anything. So go ahead and call that person and ask them if it's going to be okay. Also, it's always going to be, you're always going to run into tough things. Just try to be empathetic. If my cat gives me a Mother's Day card, it's not less of your Mother's Day. Just understand. My cat's going to give me a Mother's Day card. I'm going to tell you that right now. And okay, maybe you won't like that. Maybe you find that really ridiculous. But if you can't say anything nice, just don't say anything at all.
Try to be like a little Yeah. So to close with, I think today, one thing Lauren and I had kind of talked about, are there any particular saints that you know of that you recommend that have been helpful, that, maybe patron saints of infertility, or that you are maybe particularly close to on this journey that you could, recommend for other women, other couples?
Absolutely. So my personal patron saints are St. Maximilian Kolbe and Father Solanus Casey. Those are just generally my personal saints. But St. Anne has been incredibly helpful and a great friend in heaven. St. Gerard is the patron saint of women going through infertility. I haven't had as much contact with him, but he's certainly out there for people who need it. St. Rita for marriages. St. Catherine of Siena is protection against miscarriages, and she's certainly been a friend. One thing that has really helped us out is Our Lady Undoer of Knots. We do that novena every time we try to discern something a little bit more. We did it before my latest surgery, and we literally had a knot undone. So I feel like I'm comfortable in recommending Our Lady Undoer of Knots because she's been a great friend. But there are so many women out there, Sarah, Ruth, St. Elizabeth. There's lots of women of the Bible, holy women who you can pray to, who will be there with you, who will pray with you. That's something that I learned just recently, as I had a priest counsel me that you can ask saints who have gone through what you've gone through and holy women of the Bible who have gone through what you've gone through to pray alongside you. And that's a real comfort. You can pray to people to intercede for you, but there are just some women in the Bible who understand what you're going through. And somewhere out there, they feel for you. And to have that team on your side is really great. So I can't recommend, St. Elizabeth enough. Sarah and Ruth and so many other people out there who will really pray with you. And heck, I ask Father Solanus Casey every day to give me the Detroit hookup. We're Detroiters, both of us, and Detroit hustles harder. That's our city motto. So I will absolutely pray for you, and I'll make him pray for you too. Anyone who has infertility can reach out to me, and that's absolutely fine. You'll find me on Facebook. You can find my email anywhere, and I'm happy to talk because I love to talk about this, and I don't think people are talking about it enough.
Well, I'm really glad that we were able to talk about it today. This is something that Lauren and I wanted to discuss because we want to, I mean, Fidelis is not, we're not like for moms. You know, this is for Catholic women, all women. And Catholic women, like you said, we go through so many different, you know, walks of life, and 1 in 8 women, 1 in 8 people, like you said, are going through infertility. We just wanted to make sure we weren't speaking for people who are going through this. We want to make sure that you're able to tell your own story and hopefully bring a little bit of attention, a little bit of awareness to this to other Catholic women. So
absolutely. Thank you for doing this. It's really fantastic to be able to talk about this in a way that isn't very confrontational, and it's great to tell my story and to be with women who understand. So thank you very much for doing this, actually.
Oh, well, no problem. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be back next week. And again, thank you to Emily, and everyone have a great day, and we will see you later.